All right. For our project, we decided to interview small business owners and talk about how their small business has been affected during COVID. So we chose this topic to shed light on how small businesses have been affected by our coping with COVID-19. Undoubtedly, this pandemic has taken a toll on every person and every business, and we're hoping to see how some small businesses have adapted to fit this new situation we're all in. We also wanted to explore how their positions have influenced their opinions on the stay-at-home orders. So for my interview, I interviewed Brad Posen, who is the co-owner and co-founder of a small travel company called Global Tasters that was recently founded by Brad and his wife. The company focuses on food and drink tours around Europe, with their first trip being focused around Italy. So they partner with local restaurants, hotels, and transportation companies like bus companies in all the areas that they're planning to travel to. So like the big thing with this company is with all the travel restrictions, especially with international travel being pretty much gone, they haven't been able to do any trips or really bring in any income to their business at all, especially because they were planning to have their first trip in September of 2020. So it's a super new business that hasn't been able to take off at all since COVID started. Um, and Brad told me that they're still trying to they're constantly postponing when their trip is gonna happen. Right now it's scheduled for May of 2021. And if they're still unable to do it, they're gonna push it back even more. And they've still been in contact with the restaurants, hotels, and all the other other companies that they've been working with to try to see how they can still schedule around COVID and just to see kind of what's open because a lot of restaurants and hotels are just gonna not be open and are probably gonna be shut down forever after COVID opens. So they kind of have to work around that. But even despite all this, Brad's opinion on the stay-at-home orders, especially in the US, he felt that since Europe's stay-at-home orders are so strict, that people in the US are complaining about wearing a mask and staying at home really don't actually know how strict it can be, especially with compared to Europe where people weren't allowed to leave their apartments in some areas. So yeah, he feels that the stay-at-home orders have not been handled well by both the government and the public, and he thinks that they kind of need to be better enforced.
All right. For my interview, I interviewed Troy Thompson, who is a small business owner of TKO Arts. And what TKO Arts primarily focuses on is on artworks and interior decorations and was founded on 2002. And so they have many collaborations, especially with big names such as Warner Brothers, Red Bull, Fox Sports, and many others, which is pretty cool to see. As since they are a small business, they get all these big name brands trying to have business with them so they can make money and produce the arts. And they created some of the cool projects they did is that they created a 150 fire breathing dragon for one client for this Chinese New Year casino, and it was one of his most favorite projects. He also made stuff like a giant rabbit along with another other crazy stuffs. And if you could look at the pictures on the right, those are some examples of the artworks that he has done. And so he has I asked him a couple of questions. Has business there's more that I asked that isn't on this page, but one of the main questions I asked is, has business been able to adapt to the stay-at-home orders? And he basically responded with a yes or no answer. Since his company is so small, they don't have as many employees. They have contractors, but they're only part-time, so they don't have to give them continuous payrolls each week, only when they are hired to do projects. So this kind of helps with the money situation and health wise as well, because they're kind of where they're located, there's only four main people working on it, and their office are each separated from each other, so they're not in contact, so it's pretty healthy to just go in there and work. But bringing in as much money, no, because one of their primary money ways of getting money is that they would go to hotels and commission, they'd create art for them. But since COVID has hit, they can't really do that because hotels are hit the hardest because no one's traveling and everyone is basically staying at their own home. And I also asked him, has COVID affected your business, one, in a negative, or two, in a positive way? He also responded in two ways: negative, selling art. He's been selling less art, which is probably a given because, as I mentioned before, his main partners were hotel owners like the Four Seasons and other places. And then positive is how before COVID he had really good contacts, so he had connections within other people, and they were able to sell different stuff to them. And due to COVID, interestingly enough, he mentioned how he was able to like create these dividers when COVID started early, so that people could put between their desks, so that the spread of coronavirus in the office would be less. So it has opened up different ways of getting money as well, which is pretty interesting to note. And are there any ideas that you would like the government to put into effect to help small business owners like yourselves? Um, for this one, he really wanted to get more financial aid because he was worried that in a couple of months his business might not even exist if things are going the way it is. But he's also worried about taking too much money and maybe other business doing the same as well, maybe collapsing the market even more. So, but I think he really does. He did mention that he really did need the money. And the fourth one is, in your opinion, has the government done a good, bad, or mediocre job at helping business owners? He started off by saying it's an impossible task, but they did do a bad job. They were really bad at communicating with him and other small business owners, and the process was very confusing. And he really wanted transparency between the government and his business as well. And if the communication was a little bit better, it would have been more stress free, and it would have been more like he would have understood what to do better.
So the person I interviewed is Fuku. He's the CEO of Bintang Badminton, and it is a gym facility where they specialize in training students for badminton. They also have open courts for customers to come in and play recreationally. They have been in business for close to 20 years now, which makes it older than we are. Bintang held a steady income before COVID. They had abundant sources of income ranging from classes to selling equipment. They held classes that would teach the inexperienced and train experienced students to play. They went on to send them to national tournaments who would go on and win prize money as well. Another source of income was they held an open gym that allowed for people to get some exercise and stress relief after work by playing badminton. Lastly, they had a pro shop where they would sell equipment and gear to customers. After COVID hit, and now that we're in a pandemic, it has limited Bintang down to one source of income: private student sessions. They have reduced the number of locations they are open to train to students down to 3. They can now only hold 12 students per coach, which means an overall decrease of revenue from classes. They canceled adult training sessions as well, which results in less than 30% of previously earned revenue to cover the same amount of rent. In order to manage, KU had to exhaust most of Bintang's savings. There is zero abatement of rent. Because the landlords would not allow that, there were moratoriums that defer some of KU's rent to the following year. This was only allowed in specific counties such as San Mateo and San Carlos, but for other counties he still had to pay rent, even when it was not open to the public. While I was interviewing KU, he made a good point that although health is more important than any monetary value, the government is doing a poor job in assisting business owners and keeping it alive. His recommendation was if the economy has to shut down, it has to be a complete shutdown. If we're not making money, or if we're not using any property to make money, then we shouldn't be responsible to pay the property owners that money too.
So, for our final conclusion, we learned our interviews that the government is doing a very poor job at helping out small business owners. Our interviewees all thought the US is doing a very poor job at handling the virus compared to the rest of the world, as well as the lack of financial aid to help support them through difficult times. It also opened our eyes to the financial struggles of people during this pandemic, and seeing that many people are close to losing their businesses and a way of producing a steady income for their families. If further action is not taken from our government, this pandemic will wipe away many small businesses and cause an even bigger financial crisis than we are currently in. And thank you for listening to our presentation.